In the blistering heat of May 633 AD, on a vast, sun-scorched plain beside the Euphrates River known as Walaja, an empire that had ruled half the known world for centuries marched confidently toward what it believed was certain victory. Nearly 40,000 Byzantine soldiers, veterans clad in iron mail and scale armor, heavy infantry drilled to perfection, cataphract cavalry encased in lamellar plates that gleamed like dragon scales, advanced in disciplined ranks. Their shields locked into an unbreakable wall, their banners snapped in the dry wind, their drums thundered a rhythm that had broken Persians, Avars, and Slavs alike. This was no expeditionary force. It was an instrument of imperial annihilation, assembled to crush a rebellion once and for all. Across the dusty plain stood barely 15,000 Arab warriors under Khalid ibn al-Walid. Light cavalry on swift desert horses, mobile infantry carrying only spears and small round shields, men who had crossed hundreds of miles of burning sand without faltering. No siege engines, no supply wagons stretching for miles, no promise of reinforcements. To Byzantine eyes, this was not an army, it was prey. Outnumbered nearly 3-1, lightly equipped, apparently pinned against open ground with nowhere to run, the imperial commanders could almost taste the end of the Arab incursion into Mesopotamia. Yet by the time the sun dipped low that evening, the Byzantine army would no longer exist as a coherent fighting force. Not scattered, not retreated, erased. Not through superior numbers, not through fanatic courage alone, but through one of the most coldly brilliant acts of psychological and tactical deception in military history. Khalid ibn al-Walid did not win by breaking the Roman line. He won by making the Romans destroy their own certainty. He turned their greatest strength, their unshakable belief in disciplined frontal warfare, into the instrument of their destruction. What the Byzantines never understood until it was far too late was this: the real battle was never where they thought it was. They were not advancing onto a battlefield. They were walking, step by measured step, straight into a trap of their own making. And the architect of that trap had already calculated every heartbeat, every grain of dust, every moment of imperial arrogance. This is the story of how Khalid ibn al-Walid crushed an empire's finest army without ever needing to smash its center head-on. The Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantine, entered 633 AD as a battle-hardened colossus. For centuries, its legions had held the line against every threat: Sassanid Persians in the east, Germanic tribes in the west, steppe nomads from the north. Their military doctrine was forged in iron certainty: maintain formation, absorb punishment, then counter with disciplined mass. Heavy infantry formed the spine, men in mail hauberks and helmets, large rectangular shields overlapping in a testudo-like wall, spears thrusting in unison. Behind them stood the elite cataphracts, armored from head to horse in scale and mail, lances leveled for devastating charges. Supporting them were archers, slingers, engineers, and auxiliaries, totaling perhaps 35,000 to 40,000 men, according to the most reliable chronicles. This was not an army thrown together. It was a machine of imperial will, commanded by experienced patricians who had crushed rebellions from Egypt to Armenia. They believed Arab raiders, fast, brave, but disorganized, would shatter against Roman steel the way so many others had. Opposing them stood Khalid ibn al-Walid, already legendary at roughly 48 years old. The Rashidun Caliphate's greatest general had spent years unifying Arabia through relentless campaigns, turning fractious tribes into a mobile, highly motivated force. His army numbered around 15,000, mostly light cavalry riding hardy desert mounts, armed with lances, swords, and composite bows, infantry carrying light shields and spears, trained for speed over staying power. These were men who had marched vast distances across burning sands, fought pitched battles without rest, and survived on minimal supplies. Their strength lay not in armor or numbers, but in cohesion born of shared faith, tribal loyalty, and Khalid's unerring leadership. Unlike the Byzantines, who relied on rigid hierarchy, Khalid's warriors moved as extensions of his will, flexible, adaptive, deadly in maneuver. Both sides carried deep confidence. The Byzantines saw another barbarian incursion to be crushed. Khalid saw an empire ripe for disruption because it could not imagine defeat by an inferior force. Neither yet understood how perfectly their assumptions would collide and how only one would walk away. As dawn broke over the plain of Walaja, the Byzantine commanders surveyed the Arab deployment with grim satisfaction. Khalid had arranged his 15,000 men in what appeared to be textbook fashion. Infantry massed in the center, lighter cavalry posted on both wings, no obvious reserves lurking in the dusty distance. To Romanize, this was invitation, arrogant, almost suicidal. The imperial generals ordered the advance. Shields came up, spears leveled. The long line of heavy infantry began its inexorable push forward across the flat, open ground. Drums rolled, horns blared, thousands of boots struck the earth in unison. They expected the Arabs to either stand and be ground down or break and flee. Either outcome suited Doctrine perfectly. Khalid watched from a slight rise, expression unreadable. He gave no dramatic orders, no sweeping gestures. His men simply held. When the Roman center made contact, the Arab infantry did not charge wildly as tribal warriors were supposed to do. Instead, they absorbed the first shock, bent backward step by grudging step, yielding ground without panic. Shields clashed, spears flickered, men screamed and fell. Yet the Arab line never shattered. It flexed, retreated in controlled increments, drawing the Byzantines deeper onto the plain. Hour after hour, the pressure mounted. Roman infantry rotated fresh ranks forward to maintain momentum. Casualties rose steadily on both sides, but the Arabs showed no sign of collapse. This puzzled the imperial officers. Barbarians were meant to crack under sustained Roman discipline. Instead, they endured, trading blows, bleeding but never breaking. The Byzantine cavalry edged outward, probing for weakness, ready to exploit the moment the enemy finally wavered. What the Romans could not see, what Khalid had engineered from the first light, was that every meter the imperial line advanced stretched their cohesion thinner. Small gaps appeared between units as terrain and fatigue disrupted perfect alignment. Cavalry drifted farther from the infantry corps, chasing clearer fields of maneuver. Commanders rode back and forth, shouting adjustments, eyes fixed forward. No one looked behind the low ridges that flanked the plain. No one wondered why Khalid seemed content to let his center give ground so steadily. The stakes were rising invisibly.
The Byzantines believed time favored them. More men, better armor, endless reserves of imperial will. Khalid knew the opposite was true. Every minute the Romans committed deeper into the killing ground, the more irreversible their position became. Patience was his weapon, confidence was theirs, and confidence, when blind, becomes the perfect bait.
By early afternoon, the Byzantine line had stretched to its breaking point. Infantry pressed forward in dense ranks, shields grinding against Arab spears, dust choking the air, the metallic tang of blood sharp on every breath. Roman officers bellowed commands, rotating fresh sentries into the meat grinder at the front. Their cavalry, drawn wide on both flanks, clashed sporadically with Khalid's horsemen, probing, feinting, never quite decisive. To the imperial commanders, this was textbook attrition. The lighter Arabs were tiring, bleeding, moments from collapse. They ordered the final push. Standards surged, horns sounded the advance. The entire Roman mass leaned into the center, committed, forward momentum absolute. That was the instant Khalid released hell. No fanfare, no trumpet blast echoing across the plain, just subtle signals, raised banners, quiet riders galloping along the rear. From behind the low ridges that had screened them all day, Khalid's hidden reserve cavalry, several thousand fresh horsemen who had rested in the shade while others bled, emerged in disciplined waves. They did not charge the Roman front. They flowed around the imperial flanks like water finding cracks, cutting across the rear in converging arcs. Supply lines severed, retreat paths blocked. Roman messengers galloping back suddenly found Arab lances waiting. Simultaneously, the Arab cavalry already engaged on the wings reversed posture. What had been delaying actions became ferocious counterstrokes. Khalid's riders wheeled inward, hammering the extended Roman horse from both sides, driving them back toward their own infantry in chaos. Horses screamed, riders toppled, armored cataphracts, once unstoppable, collided with their own panicked comrades. The Roman flanks buckled inward, compressing the center still further. Now the Arab infantry, exhausted, blood-soaked but never broken, stopped yielding. They surged, spears thrust upward, shields smashed forward. The Roman line, already squeezed from three directions, recoiled. Units tried to pivot, but heavy infantry cannot turn on a coin under pressure. Shields faced the wrong way, formations fractured, gaps widened into chasms. Panic rippled outward from the rear. Men at the back saw Arab horsemen where none should be, cutting down officers, trampling standards. Commands overlapped into noise. Cohorts became islands. Isolated pockets fought desperately, blades flashing, men shouting names of wives and gods. But isolation is death in close order battle. Khalid's cavalry circled like wolves, striking commanders, standard-bearers, anyone who tried to rally. Without leadership, the Roman machine disintegrated. By late afternoon, the plain was a slaughter pen. Thousands lay in heaps where formations had stood. Dust turned red, screams faded into moans. The army that had marched out believing itself invincible found itself surrounded, compressed, helpless. Khalid had not broken the Roman center. He had let the Romans break themselves against the illusion of victory, then sealed the trap with geometric precision. An empire's finest force ceased to exist not in one dramatic clash, but in a slow, suffocating encirclement that Doctrine had never prepared them to face. When the dust finally settled over Walaja, silence replaced the roar of battle. The Byzantine army that had marched onto the plain as an instrument of imperial certainty lay broken in heaps across the scorched earth. Thousands of heavy infantry and cataphracts, estimates range from 10,000 to 20,000 killed or captured, were gone in a single afternoon. Entire legions vanished from the order of battle. Survivors staggered away in small, terrified bands, spreading tales of enemies who appeared from nowhere, of being surrounded while still pressing forward, of an army that seemed to dissolve without ever cracking at the front. Khalid's losses, though painful, were far lighter. His 15,000 warriors remained cohesive, mobile, and ready for the next march. The shockwave raced through Syria and beyond. Imperial headquarters in Antioch and Constantinople received fragmented, incredulous reports. An extermination force annihilated by desert raiders who refused to fight by the rules. Commanders who had dismissed the Arabs as fanatical but brittle now confronted a new reality. Set-piece battles, the cornerstone of Byzantine doctrine, were no longer safe. Advance with confidence, and you might march straight into encirclement. Hesitation crept into every operational plan. Forces concentrated more tightly for mutual support, but concentration made them slower, more predictable, precisely the conditions Khalid exploited best. Strategically, Walaja opened the gates deeper into Mesopotamia and Syria. Khalid's victory shattered Byzantine control over the Euphrates frontier, allowing rapid Rashidun advances that would soon threaten Damascus itself. Psychologically, the defeat was even more devastating. For generations, Roman soldiers had been trained to believe disciplined formation was invincible. Walaja proved otherwise. Survivors carried the trauma of fighting in every direction, of orders that no longer made sense, of certainty turning to terror in moments. That loss of faith in doctrine weakened the empire far beyond the battlefield casualties. Walaja was not merely a tactical masterpiece. It was the first clear signal that an older way of war could be outmaneuvered by speed, patience, and psychological precision. The Byzantine Empire adapted, slowly, painfully, but the seed of doubt had been planted. And seeds like that, once sown in superpower soil, grow into something empires rarely survive.
The battlefield at Walaja grew quiet under the setting sun of May 633 A.D., where thousands had marched in iron ranks that morning. Only the wind moved now, stirring dust over trampled standards, riderless horses, and the still forms of men who believed their empire unbreakable. Khalid ibn al-Walid had not needed superior numbers, heavier armor, or divine intervention to erase an imperial army. He needed only one thing: the courage to let certainty become the enemy's fatal flaw. This is the quiet terror of Walaja. The Byzantines did everything right by their own rules. They advanced with discipline. They pressed with mass. They committed reserves at the logical moment. And that precise obedience to doctrine turned their greatest strength into a noose. Khalid did not defeat Rome by breaking its formations head-on. He defeated Rome by letting it follow its own playbook, then rewriting the field around it with patience, geometry, and perfect timing. Empires fall not when they grow weak, but when they grow certain. Certainty hardens doctrine into dogma. Dogma slows adaptation. Slow adaptation in war is death.
Walaja exposed that vulnerability centuries ago, yet the lesson repeats across history. Superpowers blind themselves with confidence, while underdogs win by seeing what the powerful refuse to imagine. Today, the weapons change, drones instead of lances, cyber instead of cavalry, but the human flaw endures. Overconfidence still marches armies into traps of their own making. Khalid ibn al-Walid reminds us that true dominance is fragile, not because enemies are stronger, but because they are willing to wait, adapt, and strike where certainty collapses. What do you think? Could a modern army fall into the same trap of assuming victory is inevitable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of tactical genius gripped you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. How an outnumbered force turned an empire's arrogance into its graveyard. See you there.